If you already know networking but ACI still feels confusing, here's the trap. It looks familiar enough to make you think you've got it. Then it breaks your intuition the moment you try to reason through policy, forwarding, or troubleshooting. In this video, we'll unpack the misconceptions that make ACI harder to learn than it needs to be. So no, ACI isn't magic and it isn't random. Most of the friction comes from bringing the wrong mental model into it. By the end of this video, you'll see why ACI feels tricky at first, and how to think about it in a way that actually makes it click. Here's one of the biggest myths about ACI, that it somehow replaces networking fundamentals. It doesn't. Underlay health still matters, endpoint learning still matters. Policy, forwarding, and contracts still depend on you understanding how traffic is identified, steered, and allowed. The model changes, the networking does not. ACI can automate a huge amount of configuration, but it never suspends the rules of networking. Endpoints still have to be learned. Policy still has to allow the flow, and the fabric still needs a real forwarding path from source to destination. If any one of those fails, the application fails, even if the policy model looks perfectly clean on paper. That's the first big takeaway. In ACI, fundamentals don't matter less, they matter more. Because when something breaks, the abstraction disappears fast, and you're right back to real networking behavior underneath. Now let's get to the second big trap, trying to translate every ACI object into an old CLI concept. Legacy thinking says, just find the equivalent command and move on. ACI thinking says, start with policy, relationships, and intent. If you force a one-to-one translation, it feels familiar for a minute. Then the whole model starts fighting you. Here's why those legacy analogies break down so fast. In ACI, behavior comes from relationships, not just object names. An EPG is not just a VLAN with a new label. What it actually means depends on which endpoints land in it, which bridge domain and VRF it belongs to, what domains it binds to, and which contracts it provides or consumes. In other words, the object alone tells you very little. The intent lives in how it's connected. So use legacy parallels as training wheels, not as truth. They can help you get started, then they start holding you back. In ACI, the model matters more than the translation. So what's the better way to build intuition? Start with the outcome you want, which endpoints belong together, which services need to talk, which flows should be denied by default. That's the practical frame that makes ACI easier to reason about, because you're starting with policy intent and endpoint relationships, not a list of objects you're trying to memorize. Think about a simple 3-tier application. You've got a web tier facing users, an app tier handling the logic, and a database tier holding the state. The web tier should talk to the app tier only on the ports the application actually needs. The app tier should talk to the database, but the database should never take direct traffic from the web tier. In ACI, you model those tiers as endpoint groups, define the allowed relationships with contracts, and let the fabric enforce that intent consistently across the environment. This is the mindset shift that makes ACI finally click. You're not logging into every box and building behavior one command at a time. You're declaring intent, and the fabric turns that intent into consistent policy enforcement across the environment. That's the breakthrough. Once you see that, ACI stops feeling random and starts feeling deliberate. If you want to build intuition faster, learn the hierarchy in context. Don't memorize object names by themselves. Take one real application and look at how the tenant, VRF, bridge domains, application profile, EPGs, and contracts work together to support it. Then trace what changes when you add a tier, expose a service, or restrict a flow. That's when the model starts to feel practical instead of abstract. Then trace one real flow from end to end. Start at the source endpoint. Where was it learned, and which EPG did it land in? Then follow the traffic toward the destination. Which contract is supposed to allow it? Are the right filters in place? Which bridge domain, subnet, default gateway, or external layer 3 connection affects the path? That troubleshooting motion teaches you far more than hunting for the ACI version of a command you already know. Watch for 2 beginner traps that waste a lot of troubleshooting time. First, a healthy underlay does not mean the policy is correct. Second, a familiar object name does not mean it behaves like the old feature you already know. Miss either one and you can end up chasing the wrong problem fast. So, here's the real takeaway. ACI does not replace networking fundamentals. Trying to map everything back to CLI thinking creates confusion, and the fastest way to build real intuition is to think in policy, relationships, and outcomes. That's when ACI starts to make sense. So stop translating every object back into old syntax and start reading the fabric through intent, relationships, and traffic behavior. In the next video, we're going one step further into the operational benefits of ACI in real environments, especially how it drives consistency and repeatability, enables faster rollouts, and reduces policy drift across teams and environments. That's where this mindset starts paying off.